Hello and welcome to Webhack Wednesday. I'm Martin Beebe.
And I'm Martin Cairn.
And today we're going to be talking about Entity Framework Core.
Cool.
Yes. Oh, right, okay. That's it?
Yeah, that's it. It is cool.
So have you used Entity Framework before?
I am an Entity Framework fan.
Okay.
Yes.
So
only the kind of, I'm not like one of these old school EF developers that have been through the hard times.
Right, okay.
I'm like, I kind of got into it in the last year or two.
No, I've been using EF for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, my old company, it was my parting swan song from my old company was
early versions of Entity Framework
with a massive EDMX model.
Yeah.
But yeah, EF is it's come on. It's been through lots of different versions, and version 1 through till 6
point something. I think it is 6 point something 3. Something.
Yeah, lots of versions, lots of iterations, lots of changes in the structure and the way that we do stuff. And now we have another change, which is EF Core.
Yeah.
Which brings together, it brings all the things that we like and love about EF, but there are big changes because now EF is like .NET Core, cross-platform.
Yeah, it's basically been rewritten in the same way that .NET Core has to fit with .NET Core.
And also because previous versions of Entity Framework would run with SQL basically. It would be an object relational mapper for SQL. Yeah. Well, that's changed. It's also the way of you can also interact with other kinds of databases and data stores, including NoSQL stores as well.
Cool.
But for the purposes of this, we're just going to show what Entity Framework is and does and how it works in an ASP.NET Core application.
Okay.
And this is kind of, I guess, if you're building an ASP.NET Core application, you need to go cross-platform. Yeah. EF Core is kind of like the default, the recommended way of doing or working with databases. If you're actually doing production websites, it's a little bit too early for using EF Core.
Yeah.
So you should always use, EF, the current version, the production
6
version,
point
something, which is the current in-market version of EF.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing ASP.NET Core stuff,
yeah,
it's only really when you need to do ASP.NET Core stuff on Linux, cross-platform, that you need to start looking at EF Core. Also, Windows Universal Applications can now use EF Core as well.
Yeah, it's interesting on that one, so that you can use EF from within Windows. That's quite cool.
Yeah, so it's not. This is not just for web anymore. It's also for other different platforms. It's cross-platform, and it's also going to be able to be used in different kinds of applications as well.
Let's take a look.
The first thing I'm going to do is create a file, new project. We're going to create an ASP.NET application. I'm going to stick with application 56 today.
Good, that's an excellent name, I think. Yep.
Yeah. We're going to start with the 3 templates. We're going to start with the web application template. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to put no authentication. That's purely because if we add any one of these other objects, it's going to add Entity Framework for us.
Yeah.
And we want to do a configuration from scratch. Yeah. So I'm going to press OK. Press OK. It's going to start it up. It's take a little bit of time when it's running.
So you can tell us your favourite joke if you want now.
I don't have one.
Okay.
What'd you call a man with jelly in one ear and custard in the other?
What's that?
A trifle deaf.
Ah, very good.
Let's see if we've got a. What I'm going to have to add to this application is Entity Framework, because it doesn't exist at the moment.
No.
So we're going to do that in NuGet.
So again, as with most things with ASP.NET Core, pretty much everything you have to add via a NuGet package, and EF is no different.
Entity Framework.Microsoft SQL Server.
So having said that it's cross-platform and works on any database, you've gone for the SQL Server option.
Yeah, I have, because it's definitely the easiest way to show you this stuff.
Yeah.
It's pre-release. This is the pre-release version, and this is we're using the RC1 final version at the moment.
Which still amuses me.
So we're going to install that.
So we're not using final or date 1 then?
We're just using this one.
Yeah, okay, good.
So we're installing that package, and that NuGet thing, it goes off to NuGet, it goes and gets our thing.
So you could do this as well by editing the packages.json file as well in the same way?
Yeah, we could do it in the package manager as well.
Yeah.
Package manager console. So I could do install -package, and I'm going to install another one actually, Entity Framework.
Does it always have to be pronounced like that, or is that
it does.
You throw that in for the entertainment of viewers at home?
Installing NuGet Entity Framework.commands.pre, which is this package here, and that is we're going to use that later on, because to do some of this stuff, we're going to have to work from command line.
Okay.
And these are the commands that allow us to do that sort of command line interaction. So I'm going to then go and see if I can add a model to my application, because with Entity Framework, the whole point of it is to map a model onto our database. So I'm going to create a little folder. Add new folder. I'm just going to call this model.
Okay.
For no good reason.
Not models, not plural.
Nope.
Okay, fine.
Because I have a single model in my application.
Okay, so. Fine. Whatever works for you, Martin. That's,
I'm going to add
works for me too.
I'm going to add a class. And I'm going to call it. I think I'm going to call it. Do you know what? I'll call it world. And in here, I'm just going to add my class. I actually have a little snippet which just does all of my stuff for me. So demo EF class. So I've got a public class called, or class. You can tell my class from my pronunciation.
Which town did you come from?
Now, I have my, my model. So what I'm going to try and do next is I'm going to configure or set up Entity Framework. Because at the moment, I've just got this model of stuff, but I don't actually have any place where Entity Framework's set up. So I'm going to go into the configure services. So here's my configure services section of the startup.cs. So where we configure things like MVC and Entity Framework.
Sure. So we covered this in one of our earlier sessions on middleware.
Yeah.
It's within a startup.
Yeah, and the configure services is actually really what we're setting up here. Is we're setting up all of the dependency injection for Entity Framework.
Yeah.
So this is how all of the context and things are going to get shared and get passed around our application.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm adding a services.add Entity Framework, add SQL Server, because I'm using SQL Server in this instance. I'm adding a DB context called word context, and I'm passing in some options as well. I'm saying use SQL Server. Oops, daisy, let's resolve that. Use SQL Server. Statement.
Oops, a daisy.
Do I keep saying that?
Well, you do keep saying like these just sort of quite traditional phrases that my mum says, and she's a bit older than you are.
So I've got this connection.
Didn't you say golly gosh in one of our previous episodes?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think you did. It amused me.
So I just need to add a connection string here. Something wrong with my mouse. I don't know why it's going there. I think I've got the connection string. Actually, I just had it as a field, so there you go. This dot connection string.
Okay.
So it's adding my just to my basic kind of new database. I've just called it EF get started. I've copied this directly from a tutorial. It looks like.
Good. Yeah.
So you're going to create a brand new database.
You don't even know whether it's come from a tutorial.
I don't, and it can be a lot simpler than this, but you know, that's the way I roll. This is the way that my snippet came out. So this is what I'm going to do.
We'll just go with it. Don't worry about it.
So this is basically setting up Entity Framework, setting up the services. It's adding a what it's doing in the background is it's creating a DB context.
Yeah.
And it's doing all the dependency injection for you. Whenever I will be using this later on when I actually set up a DB context, it will do the injection for me. It will take this context and inject it into some other methods, and we'll look how that's. But this is where it's being set up.
Okay, cool.
So if we dug into that code, we could probably look in it and find out how it's actually doing all the setup of that stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build that solution, and I'm going to go into command. I can see, so .NET Version Manager, this is kind of, we're currently using release 1, release candidate 1.
Update 1.
Yeah, update 1. .NET Version Manager is still a thing. I'm currently using...
So what this allows you to select the version of .NET that you want to use.
But this isn't relevant in RC2. So
okay.
I'm just showing I'm using RC1 at the moment, so I'm using CLR RC1.
We'll just go with that,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to run some commands. I want to say DNX.
So why are you doing this in command then? So in previous versions of Entity Framework, this is something that would just happen through Visual Studio, or
you would right-click on it and you'd go and create migration, or you would.
It's just is it that the tooling's not there yet? Or
I think that I would really hope that the tooling's not there yet, and this isn't going to be. You're not going to have to do this migrations in command line. The fact is, most Visual Studio tools ultimately link into commands. So it just sounds like
it gets implemented here first.
So at the moment, to do some of this migration stuff, we're going to actually have to go into our actual into command line.
That's okay. I can live with it for a brief period. It's fine.
I want to run a command, dnxef
Yep.
migrations. Now, migrations is a command inside of this ef command.
Yep.
So, and I'm going to say add kick this off, and this
nice name
is going to fail because my application doesn't have a command called ef at the moment.
Okay.
Now, commands inside of ASP.NET Core are set up inside of project.json. So if we go scroll down here, we can see there's a command, web, Microsoft ASP.NET Kestrel. Okay. So if I run DNX web, it would run the Kestrel web server. What I want to do is add in the EF one. So I'm going to just do EF. And now this is that I installed a NuGet package earlier called Entity Framework Commands.
Yes. Yep.
This is what I'm going to point it at. Entity Frame.
Entity this time.
I have to pronounce it like that for my dyslexia.
Okay, fair enough. I shouldn't amuse myself.
Though it is amusing. Yeah. But there's certain words I have to pronounce differently, so I remember how to spell them. Entity Framework. Entity Framework.commands. And so now I have this this command called EF at my command line. It's actually running this thing, this Entity Framework.commands. So now when I say dnxef, it's running that command, and obviously that little NuGet package contains a little command called migrations.
Yeah. And
then when I run that, hopefully now, done.
Okay, so again, conceptually, this is the same as migrations as we know it from the older versions of Entity Framework.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Taking a look at the model and writing a C# class that represents that model in the database.
Same old EF. And now I've got a folder called migrations, and it's got inside of here two things like the world context model snapshot and then the migration sort of stuff. So this is like the code description of my class and how you would create a database from that class.
It has the old up and down methods and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Looks familiar.
So an up method and a down method. So you basically have a new every time you make a change to your classes, you create a new migration, and then Entity Framework knows how to get from one position, one state in your application to another.
And importantly, it means you can roll back if you need to as well.
You can roll back. Yeah, it's good. And obviously, these migrations are code files, so that you can put them in source control. Yeah. You know what changes you've made to your database. It's an interesting workflow. So now we have that. What I can do is I can say run a different DNX command. I'm going to say dnxef. Database update, and it's going to create the database from that migration.
Again, same as before, really. Same, just slightly different command, but the same process.
Well, what it's done is I've clearly ran this application before. You see, and I've got a database with annoyingly on this machine. I wonder if I'll tell you what, if I just go into here, my startup file, and I'll just connect it to there's a perfect opportunity to change things here. I'll create a new database called ASP.NET Core.
There you go, because it was 5 before, and that's just simply not true anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So build solution, and I'll just try and run that.
So actually, it's more correct now than it ever was.
So I'll then just do dnxef update. Yeah. It's going to find that connection string. It's going to create the database, and it won't exist this time. So it's not going to say there's an object already named town in the database.
It's taken a reassuringly long time.
Applying migration, done. Okay, awesome. So that created the database. It obviously had to create the database in that instance because it was the first time, or the second time it was the first time. And it's created that little database, and then we can use that in Entity Framework. So we now have a SQL database on our application. Okay, so now we might want to go and use this in our application. So what I'm going to do is create a controller. Actually, I'm going to use the home controller. And I'm going to just go into the index home controller. Oops. And what we'll do is start using this context. Yeah. So I'm going to say, in this controller, I'm going to just create a public home controller, the constructor for this controller. And I'm going to say this dot context equals
Does it need to be a capital C?
No, it's just not revolved yet.
Oh, okay.
equals context. So context, I want to create a local field. Let's go and create one. Oh, it doesn't know what it is. We'll just call that it's a type of world context.
Okay.
Did I actually add that as a using? No. Using my
I don't
model.
know about you, but I find that light bulb incredibly difficult to use.
Yeah, it's difficult to hit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really. I don't know why. I don't know. It's just.
So I want a private variable in this controller which contains my DB context.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to new a DB context up. That's how I would have done it perhaps in older versions. So what I want to do is I'm going to use that dependency injection thing that I was talking about, which we'd set up. So I just say I want a world context object. I'm going to call this context here. And because of that stuff that we set up in the config services in startup.cs, this is going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. No one's passed me this thing. I don't know what this object is. Oh, but I know how to create a world context. So it's going to create one. It's going to save it to the context. And then inside of index, I've then got access to this this context. So then I can just do, I can var list equals from C in context dot towns, where C.rating is greater than 5.
So you're only after the best towns here.
Yeah, exactly. Select C. And then if I just go and just return the list to the view, like that. So a really simple thing that I'm going to do with the view. I just go and edit the view. So home was up in index, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to delete all of that stuff, and I'm going to put demo EF view. Oop, I'm going to need to. Oh, what was the model namespace called? Sorry, that's the correct object that I want to use. So it's just going to print down all of the things from my application. At the moment, though, I haven't added anything to my database, so I'm going to do something which you probably don't want to do in a live application. I'm going to go into my startup file, and somewhere, doesn't really matter where, maybe just here, I'm just going to add in some code to set up EF. So I'm going to just do now, my context doesn't resolve to anything, so I need to add the context to this. So I'm going to add a context here in the same way as I did before, which is go world context, and I'm just going to call it context like that.
Okay.
So this application, the first thing it's going to do
every time
when it runs this application, it's going to delete the database.
I see why you said you wouldn't.
You wouldn't want to do this, and then it's going to ensure it's created as it's going to recreate it. And I'm going to add a number of towns into my application. I'm going to add in Corby.
Yeah, I'm interested to see which one's the best. Corby, of course. You put Droitwich Spa as the worst town. Come on.
Okay, Corby has a rating of 10. Droitwich Spa rating of 3. Reading a rating of 4. Let's change that. Let's fix that into actually genuine ratings. That's genuine.
So Corby's still 10, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
genuinely.
I've only been there once when I was 18.
And I'm going to add. There's a few things in EF which is quite nice. We can add a range, so we can pass a number of town properties to towns, so you don't have to add them individually. And then I add the third town. So I'm adding different things in different ways, and then calling it .save changes. EF's smart enough to group all of this as a single execution, so you're not going to see lots of different, like 2 different adds to our database there. It's all going to be coupled into one kind of.
So is this how you would do like seed data now?
There is a way that you can do a seed database. So on model creating, you can seed data in the proper way. This is just the way that I am doing it here.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
For the purposes of this basic demo, which I wanted to show you, because I know it's just simple. And then context.save changes, and also because I quite like to do terrible things.
We're both pretty good at that.
Yeah. So now when I start this application, it's going to create that startup. I just wanted somewhere to put it which I know would execute on startup. And we have our application's going to start up. It's going to create the database. It's actually deleted the database and started the database. That's why it's taking ages to load. And then once it's done that, it's going to go to the index page. And because I've added Corby and Droitwich Spa above 5, they're going to be the only ones which show up.
Because that's okay.
Because they're the only two which have got those properties.
Yeah.
And roughly that's like EF in a nutshell.
It is
really hackily demoed.
That's fine. And we didn't use the residents.
Yeah, we didn't.
These are in fact ghost towns.
Yeah, I was going to add me and you there, but I don't want to extend this too much.
No.
There's loads of new features in EF. We'll explore some more of them as it gets more feature-rich and stuff, and we'll show you a little bit more about best practice. But if you just want to hack with it and see how it works.
You mean that wasn't best practice?
I don't think
deleting the database on startup.
On start is not like best practice. No, it just shows you can. Yeah. That's all I was trying to do with that.
You can do that.
Yeah. But we'll look into more about EF later on as it starts getting more firm and we're starting able to use it in our applications.
Cool.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining us. Join us next week for another Webhack Wednesday.